with a variety of folks. So light on legislators, but heavy on practitioners, parents, and folks that really have been involved with regard to dyslexia and what is and isn't happening in our schools. One of the recommendations that came out of the task force included that what was to be taught in our colleges and universities that teach education programs. So they would have programs for elementary ed teachers, which of course are going to be teaching reading, as well as reading specialists. And that those colleges and universities would need to adopt curricula that was based on the knowledge and practice standards that have been adopted, and those were adopted by the Kansas Department of Education. So there really was to be what I would say that ripple effect. Every single year that we graduate students from our colleges and universities in the state with education degrees, primarily elementary education degrees, they have not been trained at all with regard to what would be the knowledge and practice standards that have been adopted by the Kansas Department of Education. Likewise, there has not been a concise collection of textbook materials or resources for school districts to adopt and start using in the classroom. There has not been a systematic plan to train the trainer so that essentially we could have an educator in each of our elementary schools that could then train each of their cohort in that school. We have not developed a list of qualified trainers. So one of the things that I have been doing in working with members of the State Board of Education, the Department of Education, as well as several members of the Dyslexia Task Force, I am working to put together what is a multi-pronged funding for the dyslexia coordinator position, which I believe requires a national search to garner applicants with experience in developing and implementing a system-wide science of reading program, a list of responsibilities for the coordinator, also funding so that we can begin the development of those lists, if you will, a stipend for an interim coordinator, because even though we approve it in the budget, it will take a period of time to do that national search and to get someone hired, as well as, and just as a piece of background, we have 24 colleges and universities in the state of Kansas that offer degrees in elementary education and for reading specialists. And I did receive this information specifically from the Department of Education. They polled every one of the institutions. There is not a single one of our colleges or universities that give degrees. So when you finish, you end up with that bachelor's degree, and then the Department of Education gives you that license to begin teaching. Not a single one of them uses or has implemented that knowledge and practice standards that would include the read-write program or any type of a system-wide science of reading program. So we do not, you think of all the kids that graduated last spring, that was a virtual graduation for most all of them, not a single one of them that then received a license from our state is now in a classroom either physically or virtually. Not a single one of them has been trained with what we know to be acceptable, and it's, you know, the science of reading guides the child through that entire process. And what we do know is that nearly 2/3 of our students do not read at the proficient level, and that 1/3 of our students read at the basic level. And yet by using this approach to children learning sound letter correspondence, decoding, synthesizing, word recognition, fluency, vocabulary, spelling, comprehension. We know that that instruction in the classroom addresses the needs of all students. And so I want you to think back to that very first meeting that we had where Dr. Nunswander had shared with us how many kids we have in our school districts. And it's over 500,000. And we know statistically that 20 to 40% of those kids have dyslexia or some form of cognitive reading difficulty. And we have not yet adopted in any of our colleges or universities the curricula that would address the need of every child and would certainly address the special needs of those kids that have that type of those types of reading issues. So I do not have this complete, but anticipate that I will have something to bring that really spells it right out. Just so that you know, I think JG is listening with us. Spent time talking with him after you guys ended your meeting yesterday and talked with him about how we work that through. So I just wanted you to know that my concern is every single legislative session that we do not put the pressure on, that we move forward, things are not changing. The ask, and I know in some ways I'm speaking to the choir because I know that Senator Dietrich has been serving on the task force, and she was there the year after the task force had been formed, and the ask then was for the curriculum to be changed in higher ed, and we were told, quite frankly, by a member of the task force that works in higher ed, that there was not a willingness for the teachers to change their curriculum. Now, that was several years ago. That was, I believe, 3 years ago. So the positive note is the Department of Education has had several proposals. They've come up with kind of a timeline, and the State Board of Education has approved those. They've approved the guidelines. What we don't have happen yet is it's not rippling the way we need it to happen in our school districts, and it absolutely has not occurred yet at the university level. And you know, the interesting thing is there were some quotes that I will make sure that you have copies of tomorrow that came from some of our schools of education as to kind of why they're not doing this. But we need to get to the point in our state that we say, if we want kids to move forward, and I think you'll remember that we had some testimony on the floor just the other night where a child at 3rd grade, if they cannot read at grade level, their chances of being successful in life is tremendously diminished. It's almost erased. And if we really want to put, you know, it's not just that we're going to fund our school districts. It's that they need to be able to be spending that at-risk money so that we have the best outcome for children. And so tomorrow, Cindy, correct me if I'm right, tomorrow we're having the hearing on at-risk funding, is that correct? Yes. So one of that components is we're going to include the designation of a child with dyslexia as being considered at risk. That has never been on that checklist. And so we as legislature are going to have the opportunity to be leaders in that. The other component that I think is crucial, in years past, school districts have been unable or not allowed to use at-risk funding for teacher training. If we want to bring about change, if we want to help teachers, because we've heard teachers come and testify, they want to be trained. They want to help their students, and I believe that to be true. So we need to make sure that school districts can use that funding so that they can get the training that they need, those teachers that are already in place, they can get the training and start using it in the classroom. We want to make sure that school districts, that buildings have coaches to help them with that. But the other thing is we want to make sure that they know that these are resources specifically for dyslexia that can be used in the classroom, that they can use their money on that. So they're not, so every superintendent or every building principal isn't trying to reinvent the wheel. We want that to be kind of that warehouse where they know exactly where they can look. These are proven, outcomes proven programs and materials and resources that school districts can use. So I know it seems a little distorted. Why would we spend so much time? Because the budget for education is tremendous. It's cruising to 56% of our overall budget. And the Department of Education budget is small in comparison because we're not talking about what's going out to the school districts. We're talking about just what they're doing across the street. But we're talking about one position, a coordinator position, but we need it, and we need to be the ones kicking up and out that we expect all our schools to be moving forward to help our kids with regard to that. Now, I saw, Senator Straub, you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So our Kansas Department of Education accredits our public schools, or possibly even accredits some of our private schools. Do we have data, and this is for legislative research, do we have data showing either the decline or improvement of reading proficiency scores since Common Core curriculums were first introduced? I know as a parent and also a student of a para that worked in public schools, that it seems that our curriculums have changed over time, and I wonder if our reading proficiency scores show the change in that curriculum of how we used to teach children how to read.
Well, I see that, Craig, I see that you are listening in on our meeting, and I know that that's something that you can provide us with that data, can't you?
I believe we can, ma'am.
Okay. So we will get that information. We will. Okay. Okay. We'll go over to Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to offer my assistance, not only as a mother of a dyslexic son that I homeschooled because public schools knew nothing about what to do for my son. So I could certainly identify with that. In fact, he only went to special reading, and I took him out at the end of third grade. He only went to special reading class 30 minutes out of the day. And it just so happened the special reading teacher, lovely person. In fact, I had her daughter in school when I was teaching in Lawrence, and she had my son in DeSoto. And she said, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'll do it for you if you would rather, but we just need to sit down with Adam and tell him he'll never learn how to read. He was 7. And so anything that I could do or that I could say that could help, because I'd like to see us look at reduced size in kindergarten and first grade. We must drastically reduce the size of those classrooms because you're right, I taught third grade. If they haven't learned how to read by the end of third grade, school is horrible for them. They want to drop out, but they're not allowed to. You're absolutely right about that. And anything that I could do to help, I want to offer my services.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Senator Gossage. Craig, I'm going to add on to your list. Can you get us some information? So since we changed the funding formula whereby kindergarten counted as 1.0 rather than 0.5, can you track down to see how many sections of kindergarten have we added on in our school districts since that change was made? So that perhaps, in fact, by adding on sections, so rather than 2 teachers, maybe we've added 3 or 4 teachers, a total of 4 teachers in that building or school district. If you could see if you can glean any information on that, I think that might be helpful. Senator Gossage, did you have a follow-up question on that?
Yes, and I think a true teacher-pupil ratio, because often that's skewed, as you and I both know. It'll look like there's 6 to 1, and then you'll see 13, 15 kids in a classroom because they count that one as the para that comes 1 hour a day.
Right, so if you can check on that. So next I have Senator Erickson, and then I think I'm back to Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I wholeheartedly support this effort, and I'm thankful that the chair is willing to pursue this. My experience, my concern is we already have a ton of money going to help students who are struggling with reading. We have reading specialists in every school that I'm aware of. We have teacher training on how to help these kids. We have letters training. We have all kinds of resources already being pumped in, and we're not seeing the results. So my concern is it a matter of not having the results? Are we not focused on the right thing? And will, just in full disclosure here, because I'm about helping these kids get the reading, being able to read where they need to read. Will we have pushback that the legislature is trying to dictate something that's not our responsibility? So those are the concerns I have. I think we need to do this, but one, I think we're already pumping in a ton. We're not getting the results that we should see. So where's the disconnect, and how do we help those kids sooner rather than later? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I appreciate those questions. I'm going to start with, we know there's a problem. We know exactly what the problem is, and it starts right with that list of 24 colleges and universities that aren't teaching an appropriate curricula. So once we know that, and when we are armed with the knowledge of, on average, that 2 to 4 out of 10 kids have dyslexia of some form, and that we are not implementing changes, or those changes have not occurred yet, to continue would be what I would refer to as managed neglect. We're going to keep funding something. To me, it would be exactly the same if the University of Kansas Med School was teaching leaching. There's only one circumstance where applying leeches actually works and helps a patient. And that is if they've had perhaps a digit that's been severed and they've reattached and they use the leech to get that blood circulation going. But to use leaching to help cure someone of COVID or of the flu or of pneumonia, we know that doesn't work. So we do know that there is an approach to reading that is, again, that system-wide science of reading program. We know that that addresses the needs for not just kids with dyslexia, but all kids in the learning of reading. But that is not required in our colleges of universities to train our teachers to teach in that way. And it is only now rippling out to require that school districts have a coordinator within the district, a dyslexia coordinator within the district. But again, they don't have anyone that's providing them with that listing of, these would be recommended appropriate textbooks, and these would be recommended appropriate resources, and these are qualified trainers to come in and help for in-service and additional training. So the disconnect is, we've had the carrot's always been there, it's been funding. So now we're going to have to take a different approach, which I refer to as the stick approach, but in this case, I think it's going to have to be a 2x4. And we are going to have to absolutely apply that 2x4 so that, one of the components that I'm looking at is that hate to say, but it's an implementation grant for the universities. If they get curricula up and ready to run by fall, this coming fall semester. So I hate to give that carrot, but what we're going to have in turn is for every college and university, and now we can only apply the stick to the Regents universities because they receive state funding. But I say the following year, if they've not implemented, then we're going to start taking money. So here's the carrot to make that curricula change for fall semester, and we have to be ready to apply the stick for the following year for those universities that have not jumped on board. Because what we are doing, and we are also going to have to force the Department of Education, because keep in mind, you can't teach just because you have a college degree. You have to be licensed. And it is the Department of Education that licenses you, that says you have met the parameters. So we cannot continue to allow the Department of Education to give a license to someone. It's like getting a driver's license and you've never set foot behind a car. We can't license someone that doesn't know how to teach what is so crucial in elementary education, and that is reading. It is the foundation. What we know is kids oftentimes in elementary school will be successful, even as non-readers, they'll be successful in math. As they move to middle school, they will, as they move on, math becomes more dependent on reading. The reading problems that some of us didn't like so much, but as you move on, it's less of the teacher verbally in front of the classroom. Think of middle school, or for some of us, junior high, and you were reading from your textbooks. And math started to be word problems. And so if we don't have that strong foundation in reading, and quite frankly, we should never have a teacher saying to a child, you're never going to learn to read, because it is an onus that we are to help that child read. So are there other questions? I'm sorry, yes, Senator Straub, you did have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and you actually touched on this too. So our Kansas Board of Regents are the accrediting agency for those universities, correct? No?
No. The Higher Learning Commission is the accrediting organization for universities. And that's true for public, private, and community colleges.
Okay. So,
They are the licensing body, so they license someone to teach in the classroom.
okay. But Board of Regents are the ones who accredit the education programs at our universities, like the courses that are required to get a degree in education.
They approve those courses. Yes, you can't start a new course or change a course without approval from the Board of Regents.
Okay, but so this dyslexia task force or dyslexia program with the science of reading, where does this science of reading program come from? Who developed it? And why hasn't our Kansas Board of Regents already adopted it? Is there something that's deterring them from, I'm assuming that they're using science-based research to accredit these education programs at our universities. Why haven't they recognized this and adopted it?
Senator Dietrich, would you like to chime in? I'll give you an opportunity. I'll let you have a bite of this apple.
Thank you. I absolutely appreciate your focus on this because there are many gaps that we've uncovered. Not everybody does have a reading specialist or have the letters training, which is a piece of this. That's why the professional development is so important. I think what we uncovered, to your question, Senator Straub, is that universities are almost like little islands to themselves when it comes to their curriculum. And so they teach their programs in all disciplines, not just in education, and whether or not they teach this, knowledge and science of reading is their choice. And so what we've done is focused on this program, and structured literacy is what every child needs to be taught now going forward. And there's also another piece to this, Madam Chair. It's the screening tool, We've asked that at the youngest levels that we use a uniform tool to screen for dyslexia or dyslexia-like reading issues because we weren't able to determine what the issue was. So the more the task force met, the more clear it became. We needed that focus and we needed to have a plan, an action plan going forward. And that's where those recommendations came from. So thank you.
Thank you. We know that parents, when I was in the conference committee, so meeting with the House side when we were discussing the dyslexia task force, because the House had a different version than the Senate came up with. And really it boiled down to what people were going to participate on the task force. And I did not want it to be legislator heavy. I felt we needed to have expertise involved in that. What we learned is the chair on the House side's wife had come in 10 years prior and had pushed and tried to get something to happen. So we are talking about something that within the state, for more than 15 years, parents have come to the Capitol for resolution to get the issue addressed. And that's why forming that task force was so crucial 4 years ago, because we really just had enough folks that were willing to do that heavy lifting to get it formed and to make it a genuine committee that was going to be very honest about our focus is only one thing. How do we help our kids? And they did stay very focused. They divided into different groups, subgroups, so that they were constantly working toward this. So again, it gets back to it's unfortunate that we are dealing with this and it's always looped in with budget. But it is what it is, and I think that I think it's just important that we work to do our due diligence. So I will bring that recommendation tomorrow, allow you guys to look at it, and it is just what I have gotten so far. And again, it's been the participation and input of people at different levels, and I think that you guys can make it even better. So when I have more final rough draft, I will simply email it to you. I don't want you to see it just when we first set foot in the committee. So I want you to have a little bit of time to think about it, and we'll work to get it kicked out. Tomorrow is Thursday. So we will get it kicked out by Friday. Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I think everything that's been said has merit, and we know that this, as you've said, this task force made a recommendation, and the legislature has chosen not to fund it over, you know, 3 or 4 years now. But I would say that I think class size is always so important, and school districts grapple with that at all times. When we put in funding to fund all-day kindergarten, we had districts that were already doing that through their at-risk money. One was the district I worked in. And, but it's not just having a qualified teacher, it's space, it's a variety of things that address that. I would ask the State Board of Education to provide for us how many districts have dyslexia as part of their in-service program, or if they don't have that detailed piece of information, if it's on their recommendations for in-service programs. Because we can fund a coordinator, but if this is not a piece of in-service, just like as Senator Dietrich knows, if it's not a piece of what is on the district's plan, then it isn't open to all. And the other thing that I would add is that we need to be spending more money on early childhood education. The sooner that we have the opportunity for children to have opportunities within for learning, the better off we are. It doesn't just happen at 3rd grade. It happens with 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. So we need to be looking at where the focus needs to be.
Well, I appreciate those comments. I will tell you that part of what I do have in here is that provide the knowledge and support for train the trainer and in-service/professional development curriculum for school districts to use. Now, this gets back to where we know the rubber really hits the road. So who has oversight on school districts? Elected school board members. But until we really start beating the drum that this must happen in all of our schools, that if you're a parent and your child is working on an elementary education degree, you want to make sure that they are armed with the tools that they need once they graduate. So there is ownership all the way around, and it means teachers demanding of principals that you're going to give us this professional development. You're going to use that funding for that. And to be clear, school districts have a whole lot of latitude about what they do with their funding. And I think I'm going to just invite you to go back and look at the first packets of information we received where it was unencumbered funds. I want you to go back and I want you to look at the funds that were received by school districts from the CARES Act and all those funds that were not drawn down. And so every single day, every school district in our state has that opportunity to help move us forward specifically with this. So do the universities, so does the Department of Education. And so the legislature is going to stay in its lane, but for us to just say, okay, we gave you funding, you guys do what you think's best, we know they're not doing that. We know they're not addressing it. So we have to find ways to have that carrot as well as that stick. Committee, I am going to have us move forward, and let's move into the discussion and action on bills previously heard, because I want us to get on the floor. I know that we have, I think, 6 or 7 bills above the line, so we are not going to be late for that. So let's start with Senate Bill 43, the Promise Act, because, oh, goodness. We had made amendments to the Promise Act, but I understand that we have a few more amendments to be made. So if our reviser could please share with us Senate Bill 43 and where we are with amendments that have been made already to the Promise Act.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You are correct. This committee has started to work Senate Bill 43 on the Promise Act and adopted 6 balloon amendments already. Those amendments include adding a definition for part-time, meaning 6 hours or more, changing the Board of Regents report start date to 2023, inserting into the allowable programs the early childhood development degree programs, defining recent graduate, meaning to have graduated within the last year, clarifying that the scholarship amount at private four-year institutions is the average of the amount at the two-year institutions for that same program. And then finally, the eligibility is capped at certain income levels. And those are the balloons that have already been adopted by the committee.
Thank you very much. Committee, do you have any questions? Senator Petty, did you have a question or do you have a new balloon for us?
I have an amendment.
Okay, so we have a balloon amendment from Senator Petty. Does Tamara know which one you're going to be requesting?
There's 2 of them. So Tamara, start with the funding.
Would that be the report or the cap?
The cap, sorry.
Thank you.
There's the chime. You have your balloon.
So, Madam
Senator, would you like to explain your balloon?
Certainly. So if you're looking at the bill, you will notice on page 4, on page 4, it's an addition of during any fiscal year, appropriations made to the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program fund shall not exceed $6 million. It's, I have talked to those that are proposing this bill, and this is, this is an adequate amount of money to start moving this ahead. I want you to know, I am a strong supporter of the Promise Bill, and I think it's important to move this forward with our community colleges and our vocational schools. But I do think that for fiscal responsibility, it's important to start off with, you just looked at a bill not too long ago with a scholarship with a cap, to look at having a cap and then be able to get information back as to how this is being implemented and how they're addressing it. And then if in fact our community colleges and vocational schools need more funding, they can come back to the legislature to address that.
Committee, do you have any questions about the balloon amendment? Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What was the thought process around the amount that was chosen? Just curious.
So actually talking to the industry as to what would be a reasonable amount to start with, that's what dictated the thought process.
I will share with the committee that last year, I think the bill that came over from the House had a cap of 10 million. I will also share that there's been some discussion, and I know that you'll remember Dr. Blake Flanders, who has testified many times just this session for us. He indicated that he thought, at least the first year or two, that 3 to 4 million would be sufficient as it got up and rolling. And so it really is the pleasure of the committee with regard to whether you want to put a cap or not on this. So any other questions? Seeing none, did you want to move your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'll move my amendment.
Do I have a second? I have a second from Senator O'Shea. Is there any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? I didn't think that that was unanimous, but I heard the voices only for aye, so the amendment passes.
I have a second amendment.
Okay, we have a second amendment.
Tamara. And it is my last, so it would make it easy for Tamara to find it.
I think you should have your new balloon. Would you like to go ahead and explain it, Senator Petty? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Tamara, can you reduce from the screen or just take it off the screen because we're unable to see the interpreter when it is up there on the screen. Thank you. I think everyone here has received the balloon, so if you want to explain it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if you notice on page 4, this it says the amount of monies expended by each eligible institution's foundation or endowment association to provide matching grants or other assistance to support scholarship awards under the program. So it's just a matter of asking those community colleges and vocational schools, you know, as I think as the chairman has spoken to, but those in the industry I've visited with, they have foundations. Some of them are much more robust than others, but this just would provide for the legislature, when there's a report, to get information about what, not to show that everybody's the same, because what Johnson County Community College does with a very robust foundation as opposed to any other community college in our state is very different. But it would provide information about what they are doing or what they are providing in these areas that this legislation specifically spoke to. So then you have, as a legislator, then you would have another piece of information about if you have a community college or a vocational school in your area, or that your constituents are availed of, to get an idea of what private dollars are also going towards scholarships our grants in this area as well.
Committee, are there questions? For the carrier of the amendment, I will share with the committee what I had shared with you. Our technical colleges don't necessarily have foundations or endowments. I know that our community colleges publish annual reports every year where they share where scholarship dollars go. My assumption is with this balloon, you're wanting to know additional funds that are coming in specifically just for students that are in receiving funding for the Promise Act.
Correct. And it doesn't, as you can see, it doesn't demand that they have a foundation. It just would provide information about if they do have a foundation or endowment association, that there is information as to what is being granted in the specific areas that of course that are spoken to in this legislation. On page 1, or page, I'm sorry, look at that is spoken to in this legislation.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Forgive my ignorance on this, but when there's a foundation or endowment at a college or university, are contributors to those funds, are they allowed to stipulate what scholarships their donations go to? I believe they can set, like, I want this scholarship to go to sports, or I want this scholarship to go to the education program. So how would your amendment would require the college to use foundation funds to match this program? Or,
you know, I would rather have the industry speak to that about how funds are directed, or whether a funder, a contributor, can direct where they want monies to go. But this does not say that it's a dollar-to-dollar match. It's just providing information and in those particular areas as to whether, if they have a foundation, whether they have any funds that are also being used for grants in that area.
And I can speak to, I mean, if someone wants to make a donation to a foundation or to an endowment, they can certainly specify it's for a nursing program or whatever. They cannot identify it's for this particular student. I guess my only concern is we have heard what it is that the senator is wanting with this amendment. What I wouldn't want to have happen is, there is that institutional knowledge that changes as committee makeup changes. And I don't want a community college that perhaps doesn't have a foundation to feel compelled that they would have to form a foundation, or that they would have to specifically start raising money to have some form of matching for the Promise Act. I'm concerned also because when we've heard testimony from our vocational colleges, they're focusing on working with business and industry and helping students not only get the education and training they need, but get that placement into a career position. So what I don't want to see happen is institutions or organizations that feel they are going to have to hire someone new to oversee or to start going after endowment or scholarship donations or matching grants or other assistance, because I think that is, now we're putting a different onus. We're taking this from financial aid and registration, where you're helping the student complete the FAFSA, find out what they're eligible for Pell Granting, find out what they're eligible for other funding. But now you're broadening and you're saying that you're going to need a foundation or folks from an endowment to start being a part of the process. But I understand that the senator is wanting transparency. And I appreciate transparency. So are there other questions? Senator, do you want to make your motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The chair is absolutely correct. This does provide transparency for our institutions. We're working with them to set up to fund a new program, the Promise Program, which, the goal is to have open up the opportunity for more students in the state of Kansas to get a higher education. And I'm from a county that absolutely needs that more than maybe some of your counties. But I do think from a transparency place, it is important for the institutions to also provide information about what's being done by them themselves in these particular areas. I don't think it would demand a new staff, because they already know what their foundations are doing, if they have a foundation. But it could be an encouragement to look into what have been some of the obstacles to not have a foundation or endowment at their institutions as well. So with that, I move my amendment.
Do I have a second? I have a second from Senator Sykes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I'm going to need division because I'm not certain where we are. So please raise your hand if you are an aye. If you are a no. Okay, so it's 4-5. That amendment does not pass. Are there any other amendments? Yes.
Can I have Tamara talk about the eligibility cap that we got put on as an amendment? Because I had another amendment and I don't think I need it because the chair was very thorough.
Thank you. Yes, as the committee will recall, this was actually balloon number 8 that was adopted by the committee. I don't know if you still have access to that one in your emails. If not, I can resend it to the committee. But what this balloon would do is it would clarify that scholarships shall only be awarded to eligible students depending on their family household income. And specifically, if the family household income equals $100,000 or less for a family of two, $150,000 or less for a family of three, and then as that gets larger and larger households, it would increase by $4,800 for each additional family member. So scholarships may be awarded to eligible students whose family exceeds those amounts only if there are scholarship monies available after those students whose family doesn't exceed those amounts receives their scholarship.
Senator Sykes, did you have a follow-up question?
No, thank you for clarifying, and thank you to the chair for being very thorough. I don't need my amendment.
Okay. Any other amendments? So committee, we have worked this, we have added amendments, and I would say, and I think that our reviser would agree, if we are to make a motion to move this out, I think because it's been amended, it needs to be Senate substitute for Senate Bill 43. So do I have a motion to pass this out as amended?
Madam Chair, I'll make an amendment to pass out Senate substitute for Senate Bill 43 as amended.
Thank you. Do I have a second? After the second. Okay, we have a motion from Senator Petty and a second from Senator Dietrich. So discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a hearing on this bill. We had amendments to this bill, but we haven't actually had an opportunity to discuss this bill. And I'm not a fan of this bill. And partially because, unless somebody convinced me otherwise, the slippery slope that I see is industry saying, gee, we need more people that have this. So taxpayers, please pay for more people to go to a junior college or go here, go to a technical school. And are we, the taxpayers, is this 2-year program going to start being like 2 more years of high school? I don't feel like everybody needs to go to junior college. Not everybody, I did, but that doesn't mean everybody does, nor should we be funding these industries. I think I said at the outset, if these industries want to do that, they can fund scholarships themselves. They can have internship programs. And I don't know that this is the best use of taxpayer dollars, and I'm concerned about us favoring certain programs over other programs. And just one verse, that's my concern.
Senator Straub?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to echo Senator Gossage's comments, I also, because this bill has been amended so many times here, I would like to see the thing in full script before voting on this with the amendments in the bill. If that's possible, I don't know.
It is possible. It's not possible for us to do that right now. So committee, I think if the maker of the amendment and the seconder of the amendment would be willing to withdraw, then we will bring this back up when we meet next, and we will make sure that we have a copy from our revisers that has all of the balloon amendments. And we will have an opportunity to discuss things such as, why did we pick those 4 categories as far as it has to fit within those, because those are the jobs that we need the most, and things like that. So yes, did you have a question, Senator O'Shea?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My one concern or question is still, I remember I asked the question, why weren't companies maybe paying for some of these scholarships? And it sounds like sometimes they do come in and help the students finish up. Maybe if there's a promise of taking employment with that company, then they'll help them finish up their degree. And so how can we still incentivize them to do that? And I don't know the answer to that, but I've wondered that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so, maker of the motion, did you withdraw?
I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you. Second, withdrawn. Thank you. And I think that we have some folks that are listening, as well as some in attendance, that will get some information for you. What we do know from our technical colleges and many of our community colleges, oftentimes the equipment, which is the most expensive component of a career technical education, oftentimes that is actually provided by business and industry. And so that's how prices have remained affordable. Student debt has been low, but quite frankly, we have a lot of folks that are displaced right now from COVID, but we also have folks that don't recognize that they have an opportunity to even be eligible for Pell Grants. So you know how we've talked about carrots and sticks? This is a carrot to get them in there to fill out the FAFSA and the assistance to complete that FAFSA, and then to find out what funding is available. And that's why all along we have felt what the Department of Budget has put out as far as a cost for this is very high, because actually quite a bit of this funding would be coming from the feds through the Pell Grants. So at this point, I'm going to say thank you for
Madam
the
Chair?
hard work of the committee. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Reviser?
Yes, a couple of quick questions.
Yes?
Would the committee like to see where the changes are when they review this as a whole document?
Yes, we do need to see where those changes are.
Okay, thank you. As a substitute bill, you won't get that, so the document you will see will be a little bit different than the substitute bill that you may or may not vote on later. And then my second request is a little bit of revisor leeway to make all of this work together.
We will always give you leeway because we are dependent on you working it together so that we can see it. So thank you very much to our revisor. Committee, thank you for your hard work today. Our meeting is adjourned.